Hello and welcome to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, created to help our screen industries better look after all the people their businesses depend on.
And stay on safe legal ground. It's part of a growing collection of practical resources and guidance that you can dip into without it taking you forever or costing you anything. It's supported by the BFI, awarding national lottery funding.
We'll be talking with people across production, distribution and exhibition, animation, VFX and gaming about the challenges to well-being we face when deadlines and budgets are tight, and how, most importantly, to improve things. We are your hosts, Tasita Small from the Small HR Company, the HR for Entertainment one,
and Keith Arrowsmith, the legal one, a creative industries solicitor and programme director for WorkWise for Screen. Hi Tasita.
Hi Keith, how are you?
All good, thank you. What I'm hoping we can do in this episode is to focus on the legally binding contracts that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis to make our businesses work, and think a little bit about why we do it, how we do it, and what we can do better.
And what I love about this episode is that we're going to speak about the fact that there are so many varying types of relationships we can have with our businesses, or businesses can have with individuals, and maybe scrape the surface a little bit on what that means for us all.
And to help us, we've got another fantastic guest, Gemma Woodhead from Lewis Silkin.
Hi, Beth. Nice to be here.
Hi, Gemma. Lovely to have you.
Let's just first ask you, Gemma, how did you get involved in the screen sector?
So I currently work at Lewis Silkin, but prior to that, I worked at Warner Brothers for 12 years as an in-house employment lawyer. And I looked after our TV production, games businesses and some of our films businesses. So I've worked in the industry a long time. And then since joining Lewis Silkin, we're a law firm that predominantly works with creative businesses. So I've been able to continue to work with creative businesses since I joined.
And what do you think makes the creative industry slightly different from all the other sectors? Do you think we have our own special ways of doing things?
Completely. I think it's unlike any other sectors. We're so unique in an industry in that we have kind of industries within an industry. And, if you look at the types of people who can be working on production, you've got your creatives, your electricians, your construction people. It's so vast and such big numbers. And also the fact that there's so many freelancers, I think it's completely unique to our industry as well, and brings us lots of issues that you just wouldn't find in other sectors where they have much more kind of stable workforces and traditional workforces, I'd say. And it's an industry that relies so much on relationships.
Do you think because we're talking about creative people, there's a reluctance to deal with the paperwork?
Completely. So many times I was told, we can't have contracts like this, our competitors won't be doing this, people won't want to work for us, they just won't sign this, they won't take the role, we need this person. So I think there's completely a fear within the industry of not wanting to come across as being heavy-handed, legalistic, kind of old-fashioned and traditional. You want to be that dynamic. I think the way in which we contract people as well, we used to, on a Monday evening, say we need to hire this person, they need to start in the morning. You just don't really get that in other sectors. So that puts massive amounts of pressure on, ensuring compliance with ensuring that contracts are in place. I think what's also really unique about it is in a lot of industries, so you'd have traditional HR teams doing the contracting, whereas actually on productions, it's often freelancers doing the contracting. It's really hard to make sure they're all following the correct procedures and the correct standards.
If you're in a small organisation, sometimes the overhead of having to deal with lots and lots of paperwork feels like a burden.
There's sometimes a fear of it, and people think that it's a legal process, but actually there doesn't need to be a fear. And I think if you could, from the outset, if you get really good templates that are really clear, everybody understands what contracts to be used in what circumstance, document that process so that when you get the next, say a production manager coming in, they can just give them a manual so they understand what they need to do for your organisation. I don't think there needs to be the fear there, and I think it can be streamlined. And, you've got to do your right to work checks. You should be doing things like that. So I think you can package it all together if you have an onboarding process where, you ensure kind of your key essentials are done, which, would include things like making sure you've done your right to work check, making sure they've got the contract, any key policies that you want to give people. I think you can make a process that can seem quite scary, actually quite manageable.
As a small business owner within the creative area, and, I've just set up a company with maybe a couple of people, how do I even know where to start as a small business? What are the contracts I should be looking at for my team? What are the fundamentals you'd say to understanding a little bit more about contracts and the why?
I think, reach out to organisations that can help. So I think this WorkWise initiative is brilliant to, help people kind of understand the basics. There's obviously Pact can help. If you need general kind of employment advice, there's ACAS. And, you can reach out to people like us. We do work with small businesses. We're really supportive of kind of startup companies. So, we're happy to help out as well and, have an initial conversation if you just want to kind of bounce ideas off. I think key onboarding things that I'd make sure everybody does would be to do a right to work check, make sure everybody has the correct contract in place. I think if there's any training, so I think key training is sexual harassment training. I'd say there's new laws that came into place in October of last year where companies now have a positive duty to take steps to prevent sexual harassment happening, and training is key. But I think as an industry as a whole, we were kind of ahead of the curve a bit, following the Me Too movement. We've been an industry that's been incredibly, hot on making sure people are trained correctly on sexual harassment. And I understand that might be hard for small businesses, but I think there's organisations you can reach out to who have kind of off-the-shelf, ready-made training that you could ensure people have done. I advise companies do annual training. So if somebody's come back, outside of a year period, I'd make sure they're trained again. And then any policies, any key policies, make sure that you send those out as well as part of your onboarding process.
Just on that point, what should be in a contract? Like, what are the basics that as a freelancer or as a person who's PAYE, what are the things that should be in my contract, looking at it from that side?
So I think take it back to basics and think, what is the fundamental point of you putting a contract in place? It's not just a tick box. It's, it's important so that the individual understands their rights and obligations, and you're setting out to them clearly what you're going to do for them, but also what they need to do for you. So if it's a really long, complex contract that they don't understand, it's completely defeating the point of having it in place in the first place. So what I'd say is I would always advise companies to have a much shorter basic contract in place that people actually understand and memorize and act in accordance with, than reams and reams and pages of complex wording that they don't understand and is actually just completely pointless. So if I was advising an organisation on what to put into a contract, so there's Section 1 of the Employment Rights Act sets out certain items that need to be given to employees. It's a day one right that you have to give employees a written statement of certain particulars. So I'd say that make sure that your contracts cover all of those elements. And then given that the industry we're in, I think IP is obviously essential, that you've got a good IP clause in there that, ensures that you earn all the IP that's created and can exploit it as you need to. I also think that confidentiality provisions are key, given, as I've previously said, with such an industry that's such high profile. So I think it's really key that we have good, robust confidentiality provisions in place. Finally, I'd say consider whether you want to put restrictive covenants into your contracts and non-competes, because I think, again, we're an industry where there's lots of movement between competitors. We're an industry where, you could have junior people as well, being really key to in your creative process. So I'd say don't just consider them for senior people like you would do in some industries. Consider whether you do have kind of key creative roles that maybe more junior people are doing and who you might want to put covenants in place with as well.
Something that I see and hear a lot of is that people don't read their contracts, they just sign them. What can we do to help people enjoy reading the contract? Is it about, like you say, shortening, taking out the jargon? What can be done to help people to understand the importance of that document, but enjoy it?
Yeah, so one thing we've been doing at Lewis Silkin is we've created a visual contract. So we've been working with clients to do that, and it's all pictures and it takes people through a story. So, for example, we've worked with some games companies and it's the contract's like a video game and you go through different levels and then you just have a few bullet points of what the key provisions are, relating to like at your hours or your pay and things. But I think that's one way to make it so much more fun and so much more appealing to people who work in the creative industries.
Gamified contracts. I am sold. Oh my gosh. Oh, wow.
I do minutes for board meetings, which look like a storyboard. And it really helps because you get that sense of a dialogue rather than just someone telling you stuff. It really is a joint project then, isn't it? It's kind of what do we need together to help us work really efficiently and have a clear understanding of what we both want to achieve. If that's our world, if we operate in a visual world, why do we force people to read hundreds of pages of dense legal nonsense? Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
And then like the clauses don't stand out, whereas if you've got a visual contract, people, it's like that visual recall, isn't it? And people might remember the picture or something and then think, oh yeah, that's what that says.
I think the other thing we need to keep in mind is that some of the marketplace we're addressing is international. So it might be that we're dealing with projects or funding that's come from overseas. Does that affect the relationship at all?
It completely does. And I think that's one thing that actually people make a lot of mistakes with and don't understand the complexities. And it's an issue that I used to deal with quite a lot when I was at Warner Brothers because I looked after our international businesses as well. So obviously there's different laws in every different territory. And if somebody is working in that territory, so even though you might have contracted them in the UK, if you send them to work abroad and they're there for a significant period of time, and in fact in some territories it doesn't even need to be a significant period of time, they can get employment rights in those territories. So you need to ensure that you're complying with the laws in those territories. There's obviously immigration considerations as well, whether they even actually have the right to work there. And there can be tax consequences as well. So you need to ensure that you're complying with all of those things. It differs depending on the territory that you're dealing with. So things like, IP provisions can differ in different territories, and it's important to ensure that you've got the correct assignments that are compliant with the laws in international territories as well, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you've not got your proper IP assignments and you can't exploit something in a certain territory.
I think every small business will need to have a suite of documents, not just for employees. There's lots and lots of sources of services and goods that we need to have in place in order to do our jobs. So do you also get a sense of the paperwork that we need when we're dealing with other suppliers of services?
Yeah, so it's important. So obviously you have your Schedule D individuals, so you to have a certain type of contract for those people, which will have slight differences to your employment contract. And then obviously you've got your learn out contracts as well. So you'd need to ensure that you've got the correct contracts in place with those people. And I think fundamentally, kind of the key concepts you want to be covering probably is similar, IP, confidentiality. They're all still important things. It's just, obviously there's certain kind of rights and protections that employees have, which your Schedule Ds and your learn out people wouldn't have. So they wouldn't necessarily need to go into those contracts, but it's still important that you have those contracts in place and, have your key concepts.
Setting up a contract takes time and energy and maybe some budget. So why do we bother? What could possibly go wrong if we didn't have a piece of paper that sets out those important terms and conditions?
So I think key one is you'd obviously be in breach of the Employment Rights Act because, as I said, employees have a day one right to receive the written particulars of employment. But I think in our industry, it's so important because if you don't get those IP provisions and the correct assignments and you don't earn the IP, and it then goes on to be a very successful show or game, and then you don't earn that game or TV show or film and somebody comes back to want to exploit you and sues you for that. I think it's so important and it can be so costly. And, the cost of defending an IP infringement claim can run into, hundreds of thousands. So actually, the price of getting your contract right in the first place and taking that time to get that correct, it's so much more beneficial and would be so much cheaper to get that correct in the first place than what you might spend if it goes wrong and you're in an IP dispute, or, if you want to terminate somebody and you've not got the correct termination provisions and somebody brings a claim against you. It's much more expensive to defend an employment claim than what it is just to get a good contract in place, a good template that you can use, and to make sure that you've put that in place.
I'm going to ask Tasita, that you must get involved where things have gone wrong. And obviously there's time, there's effort, there's heartache. What do you see happen when things go wrong?
When things go wrong, you have a couple of things happen. You have emotion. The person's been affected by whatever they feel has gone wrong or actually has gone wrong. The company who has emotion around protection, minimizing risk, where maybe they have done something incorrectly or don't feel that they had done something correctly. So that emotion overlaid with a lot of legal jargon is the challenge. How do we navigate this situation with empathy, understanding, but also the law? So what I see is on one side, where someone hasn't read the contract or understood what they've signed up for, or they've breached it and they haven't understood. And then on the flip side, where you have the company, it may be where they too haven't understood what they've asked somebody to do or haven't asked somebody to do. And as a result, the contract is a relationship with the company, which can be just four walls. Like, who is the company? So what I see is a navigation of people who don't sometimes understand what's going on, but have signed this thing to say that they do. And which is why I always encourage people to read the contract before you sign it, learn to love them. HODs, you've now got you're a HOD for the first time, or you're a line producer, or you've now got a team. Read the contracts of the people that are working for you, because they may have different clauses to you. There might be different things involved. That's what I see, is the emotion and the legality clashing at a point where something hasn't quite gelled or gone well.
And what I would say is an extension to that, I think, in smaller businesses or in our industry where you have worked with people on lots of productions and gone from one to another, people always think, oh, it's fine, we're friends, we don't need all this kind of legal contracts and things, it's never going to be an issue. And then when it does go wrong, it's even worse because you don't have those protections in place, and there is that heightened immersion because actually you have been good friends, you have been close, you've worked together in a small team. So I think, I always say prevention's better than cure.
I've been involved with the law for 30 odd years, and I've only ever ended up in court twice. And I think sometimes the fear of having to go through that kind of process is sometimes helpful because it focuses the mind on finding a solution that's going to work. And sometimes it's the worst possible thing for a business because it's so distracting. Mm-hmm. You have to put so much energy into a dispute in order to find a suitable solution for everybody.
Completely. So I think I've been a lawyer now for about 14 years and I've never once ended up in tribunal. And for me, if you end up in tribunal, you've failed. You've not done a good job. I think everybody's lost. Even if you win the case, you've lost because you've spent your management time dealing with it. You never fully recover costs.
But it does happen. And the reason we have them is because sometimes employees and or companies can do things that are a bit rogue. So at least the protection is there. People are maybe not doing what they should or could do for those people that need the protections.
Yeah, and I think that point that you said about people going rogue, and we've got to understand that at the end of the day, employees are humans. You just can't legislate for what might happen to somebody who's been a good employee for years. Suddenly things can happen in their personal life and it goes wrong and they do go rogue, and then you do need these protections.
But also on the flip of that, companies also go rogue. So it's not always the person on the other side's necessary agenda. So contracts are important for everybody.
Yeah. I think added to that as an extension of that, it's the policies as well, because often it's in your policies where you'll set out things like, prevention of sexual harassment, anti-bullying and anti-harassment, kind of more about the standards of behaviour that are expected of people, but also the standards that are expected from the company and what employees can do and where they can go to if something does happen to them. And I think, if you don't set out clearly to employees, how they can raise issues of maybe sexual harassment or bullying and what support might be available to them, you're never going to get people stand up, and we're never going to speak up, and we're never going to improve the industry if people are not speaking up and are scared to. So I think that's another reason why it's not just important to have contracts, but also to have good policies in place.
Gemma, sometimes the disagreement isn't with another member of your team, but sometimes it's someone external to the team, and it might be a letter from HMRC, or it might be a letter from another body. So do you have experience of having to deal with those kinds of situations?
Actually, minimum wage is a good one. So HMRC have said that they've just completed a national minimum wage audit in the retail sector, and they were really kind of targeting retail companies. They've said that the media and creative sector is the next on their radar and the next industry that they're going to be targeting and doing audits on. So I think if I was to give you kind of two key hot topics for the industry where we need to ensure compliance, I would say sexual harassment prevention. I think since Me Too, we've got a massive spotlight on our industry. And I think people who work in our industry are no longer prepared to put up with maybe harassment that they previously suffered. And I think the second topic is national minimum wage and ensuring that you're paying people correctly and complying with all of the provisions around that. And it's a really complex area of law. It's a very technical area of law. So again, I think if you need to kind of prioritise the areas that you're investing in, I'd say that's probably an area where it's worth taking some professional advice on.
So we know that the laws have changed in the last few months to take account of this more nuanced approach to sexual harassment. And there'll be more changes on the horizon as the Labour government continues its work on the employment bill. So what do you need to do as a business to make sure that the good practice that you've been helping us understand today stays good practice?
So I recommend that people diarise annually just to, review their contracts and to, have a think of what laws have come into place in the last year that might impact my contract and should I make any changes, because, it's hard to keep constantly updating templates. And I think when you've got a lot of templates as well, you can update one and then it doesn't necessarily carry through to another, and then you get in a mess again with all your templates. So I'd say diarise annually to check all your templates to make sure that any changes you made are kind of uniform and consistent as much as they need to be. And then just make sure you're keeping up to date with employment updates. You can sign up to get updates from law firms. We send out a weekly newsletter that's free to sign up to. So just make sure you're doing that and keeping abreast of kind of changes that are happening. Because, as you said, Keith, the Labour government are bringing in a whole package of new reforms. And then I think one thing that I always advise clients to do as well is be reactive to things that might have happened as well in your company. So social media, for example, I've had a few clients recently who've had lots of problems with people posting inappropriate things on social media, but then identifying themselves as employees of the company. So I think if you get an issue like that, react to that and make sure that you do update your contracts or your policies so that they cover live issues that you might have had as well.
I think that's really helpful because you have a sense of the risks that a business is facing at any particular time.
Yeah.
And risks change. With each project, there may be slightly different things that we need to keep in mind. And I think making it specific also means that we're not wading through lots of stuff that no longer applies because our business has moved on or the project's moved on.
Yeah, well, the industry's changed and, things that's key now in the industry wasn't necessarily key 10 years ago. So again, there's only so much information that people can take in, and you need to make it relevant and pertinent so that they do take it in and comply with it. And that it's not just stuck in a drawer somewhere that nobody's read or understands. So it's just making sure that you do focus on those key risk areas.
Gemma, thanks very much for helping us through what could be a really thorny subject and something that we all take for granted, but need to have a little bit of time, a little bit of energy to make sure we get right every single time. Thanks, Gemma.
Thank you very much. And we'll speak again soon, I'm sure.
No worries. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Tasita, what was the thing that Gemma focused on that you think will make the biggest difference?
For me, it would be about getting yourself some clean templates, starting from scratch and learning to understand what's written down, looking at things that are of risk, like your IP, your different covenants, making sure you're doing your right to work.
And I think for me, it's that focus on the job. Why are we entering into these contracts? What do we need to say? And what can we leave out? The simpler it is, the easier it is to understand, the more chance we'll have of being happy and compliant as we deliver those services.
Yeah, it's that formalization of a relationship. Any good relationship will have these things going for them. So no, I really like that.
Thanks for listening to the WorkWise for Screen podcast, supported by the BFI awarding National Lottery funding.
Our online platform provides lots of easy to understand information and invites to our events. Visit our website at workwiseforscreen.org.uk and register for the latest updates.
Please follow us on social media and join in this crucial conversation.
And contact us with suggestions for future episodes or if you can support the programme in any other way. This podcast is produced by Podcast Labs. Music is by Benjamin Squires.